Because most of the spaces we design are in schools are isolated spaces for rhetorical questions for which we already have the answers. And the answers are already in the back of the book. And the fact that those answers already exist means they're not engaging. Who cares? Everybody already knows that. Being the first person to discover the North Pole is exciting. Being the 9,000th person to go there and you can, get a plane there and, have a little holiday, that's not the same thing. Seth Godin at this year's Enterprise said, "Never again is someone going to pay you to give them answers they can look up online. They will only pay you to solve problems that don't yet have answers. If you want to find a principle for building your schools, if you want to find something that's the new Nordic school, that's it." Because instead of having, right now we're just designing these things that are about isolation and control, not access and community. So let me give you a formula that proves this. So if you're in a context you don't understand it, you use research in that context and collaboration to understand it, and you amplify that with technology. In most cases, we would call that's really wise, that's prowess, that's using your resources to understand the world around you. In school, we call that and we're building these spaces that are really about processing children through by their date of manufacture. I mean, this is not an inspired learning space. It's the same old thing we've had forever. We used to be able, by the way, to dream big dreams. Like, can you imagine a world where you could have a device in your hand and that device would let you video chat with people far away? Or can you imagine being able to have digitized books that you could read and think about and you could go anywhere? Well, provided you had a giant machine. And could you imagine having a library in your home with access to all the world's knowledge, which you could then, for some inexplicable reason, present on the roof? I don't know how that works. Can you imagine having an answer machine in your house that if you had a question, you could look it up and it would tell you what the answers were, and you could, see pictures and have media, and you could print stuff out, and even, you could hear the first recording of the phonograph. You could explore the world. Can you imagine a world like that? That used to be science fiction, but it's not anymore. So, is this today's science fiction? Really? You're dreaming small dreams if that's science fiction for you. Your science fiction isn't even as good as stuff 100 years ago. So dream bigger. Right? Because what we don't need is a bunch of stuff that's just about consumption again. And primarily in our schools, what we want students' attendance and their compliance and their uniformity. And it's accidental as those were the initials of my school. Right? Because what we're really doing is we're preparing students to become, well, mechanized. In fact, we're trying to standardize students in many cases so they're the same thing. But if you build a machine where all the parts are the same, it's not a machine that works particularly well. It's like the Cavendish banana. Do you know what the Cavendish banana is? You can look it up after this. Tell me about your banana seeds. Some of you are looking puzzled. Why is that? Because your banana has no seeds, because it's a Cavendish banana, which was bred to be seedless. Now, banana seeds are not terribly large, even real bananas, but they're aesthetically unpleasing. They're black, and they have this kind of dark thing, and people didn't like it. I want my banana to be a pure, creamy color. So they bred these bananas to be without seeds, which is great. How do you plant new seedless bananas? Where do you get the new plants from? We take the cutting of the old plant, and you plant that, and then you keep cutting that, and you plant that, and you keep cutting that. And what you get is a monoculture. Every banana is a clone of all the other bananas, which is no problem until, as started happening about 50 years ago, there's a fungus that attacks Cavendish bananas. And those bananas, because they have no seeds, they can't adapt. They're all the same, so they can't fight off that disease. And in fact, there are 2 cultivars of the Cavendish banana already that you literally can no longer plant anywhere on the planet And soon that will happen as well, cabbage bananas, because they're not real. What we need to be doing is getting students out into the world where we need their diversity, not their uniformity, their diversity to make real things in the real world. We all know that education has to transform somehow. But let me tell you, taking the tools of the past and shoving them into the tools of the present is not transformation. And what we need to be doing is making sure that our educational system stops burning off so much energy as heat without producing light. Every class should be about students starting, okay, maybe we start in that intimate setting of the classroom, but by the end of that class, they should be out in the real world making light. We need to be capturing that energy, not losing it again. So instead of just having a pedagogy focus on consumption for starters, deliberatively consume it, let's add QCs to that, right? Let's add curation, which is what happens here in this museum, where we take all these pieces and we assemble them together into a new story so that people can understand stuff. And we add to that creation, the stuff that we make ourselves, and we leverage collaboration in all of that. Because having, one C is not very powerful, but C4 is really explosive. And if I look at the average assignment, it starts out at my desk, it goes to my student's desk, they do some stuff, they send it back to my desk, I grade it, it goes back to their desk. Sometimes, they don't even come back to pick it up. And that does have an impact on the world. But it's not necessarily the most positive impact on the world. I mean, I've estimated that in the average class at my school, what we burn off as irrelevant heat is about 5,000 hours per teacher. Each student spends about 50 hours on those final projects that they don't even care about, I don't care about, nobody cares about, it's just going through the motions. And there are 25 students in the course, and there are 4 courses, 5,000 hours. How could that benefit this community? How could that benefit the world? And that image of education is a very old one. It's one from Aristotle, in fact. Right? So there are flowers out in the world, and those flowers need to be cultivated. They also need to be accessed. And so the idea is a bee goes out into the world and gathers nectar and pollen and brings it back as food for the hive. And has a responsibility to tell others in the hive how to go out and get that stuff. Right? So that they can go out and gather it and bring it back as well. It becomes a recursive process, right? And that recursive process generates 2 really interesting things. It generates food in the world, stuff that will grow again. And it generates food for the bees, and food for us. So what we need to do, I think, is take the linearity and the isolation and the hierarchy and the simulation out of school and replace it with some things like recursivity and connection and community and engagement. In other words, what we need is a new Danish classroom. That's critically important. I just nearly killed myself, which many of you are probably excited about. Let me give you one example of this. And I will finish up here in just a moment. Oh, I can't do that because I just asked them. I'm skipping some slides when I got it right. One of our sociology teachers, ACU, used to teach sociology. He taught a class about disability. And he used to teach it in a room like this. He puts stuff up on the board, and people would watch it, and they think about it. Here's how he teaches it now. Every student gets a wheelchair. And they're dropped off in the center of our town. And they roll around exploring the world. And their class is for 2 hours to record your experiences. So, they take movies with their laptop, with their iPads or with their iPhones. They record audio, they look stuff up, the laws. They found a really interesting thing. In the US, there's a law about access, about accessibility of public spaces. So there's a library downtown. The front doors of the library are there. The handicapped accessible parking is right in front of it. According to the law, that's correct. Between those two, 7 steps. But there's a ramp. The entrance to the ramp is around the corner, halfway down the building. By the way, there's no way to get onto the sidewalk until you get to where the ramp starts. So you actually have to wheel through traffic and through a stop sign to get onto the ramp, which you then have to roll all the way back around the building to get into the front doors. The students said, this is ridiculous. We need to get this changed. So they wrote a proposal to the city council, and they changed it. Those students fundamentally understood disability and equality in a very different way than they sat in the room. Because they're making light in the real world. And that's what we have to do. So, the thing is, our students are connected in ways unlike ever before. And the last thing you want them doing is cutting off those connections. Because this is your classroom. This is where we need Danish students with Danish wisdom and Danish ingenuity. Combined with all of the students from all the other places to solve the world's big problems. That's something worth doing in education. Now, it might be a little nerve-wracking at first. We've done things a similar way for a long time. And when you change, it can be scary. You're not sure what to